Imagine removing chili peppers from the cuisines of India, Thailand, Korea, China, Hungary, Ethiopia, and half of Africa. No vindaloo. No Sichuan hot pot. No gochujang. No kimchi glowing red in its jar. No Thai bird's eye chili. No Hungarian paprika. No peri-peri chicken. No sambal. No sriracha. These foods feel ancient. They feel inseparable from the countries that created them. In some places, chili is more than an ingredient. It is a national identity, a family tradition, and a test of pride. But 500 years ago, not one of those countries had ever seen a chili pepper. The plant did not come from India. It did not come from China, Thailand, or Korea. It came from the Americas, where indigenous farmers had been cultivating it for thousands of years before the rest of the world even knew it existed. Then European ships carried it across the ocean. Within a few generations, this small fruit crossed continents, replaced spices worth more than gold, rewrote ancient recipes, and convinced billions of people that pain tasted good. No other crop conquered the human palate so quickly. And the strangest part is that chili peppers do not actually burn you. They simply convince your brain that you are on fire. But this story does not begin in an Asian market, an Indian kitchen, or a Mexican restaurant. It begins with a bird. Millions of years ago, long before human beings cultivated the first field, wild chili plants grew across parts of Central and South America. Their fruits were small, bright, and almost certainly far less impressive than the peppers found in supermarkets today. The plants had a problem. Like every fruit-bearing plant, they needed animals to eat their fruit and spread their seeds. But not every animal was equally useful. Mammals tend to chew. Their teeth crush delicate chili seeds, damaging them before they can pass through the digestive system. Birds swallow many of those seeds whole, carry them across long distances, and deposit them somewhere new. So the chili plant developed one of the cleverest chemical defenses in nature. Capsaicin. Capsaicin activates a receptor in mammals called TRPV1. That receptor normally responds to dangerous heat. When you bite into a hot pepper, capsaicin attaches to it and sends an alarm to your brain. Your mouth is not getting hotter. No flame exists. But your nervous system reacts as though tissue is being burned. Your eyes water. Your nose runs. Your face turns red. Your heart rate rises. Your body begins sweating in an attempt to cool itself. The plant has successfully tricked you. But birds experience something very different. Their version of the receptor is far less sensitive to capsaicin. A bird can swallow a pepper that would leave a human gasping for water and feel almost nothing. The mammals stay away. The birds eat freely. The seeds survive. It is an elegant evolutionary arrangement. And then human beings arrived and ruined the plan. Instead of avoiding the pain, people became fascinated by it. Archaeological and genetic evidence indicates that people in the Americas began using wild chili peppers thousands of years ago. Capsicum starch grains recovered from ancient sites in the Americas show that humans were handling peppers at least 6,000 years ago, while the long process of domestication may reach even further into the past. This did not happen in just one location. Different indigenous societies domesticated several capsicum species independently across Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. Capsicum annuum gave the world many familiar peppers, including jalapenos, poblanos, cayenne-type peppers, and sweet bell peppers. Capsicum chinense eventually produced habaneros and some of the hottest peppers on earth. Capsicum frutescens included varieties related to Tabasco and African bird's eye chilies. Ancient farmers selected plants for size, color, flavor, productivity, and heat. Generation after generation, the tiny wild fruit became larger, fleshier, and more diverse. Some peppers became long and thin. Others became round. Some ripened red, yellow, orange, brown, or deep purple. And some became almost unbelievably hot. For the peoples of ancient Mexico, chili was not merely seasoning. It was part of the basic structure of food. Maize provided energy. Beans supplied protein. Squash offered nutrients and storage. Chili added flavor, vitamins, and intensity. Together, these crops supported cities, trade networks, armies, and civilizations. The Maya used chili in sauces, drinks, medicines, ceremonies, and trade. It could be ground with maize, mixed into cacao, or combined with other plants as a treatment for illness. The Aztec world was equally obsessed. Markets in Tenochtitlan sold peppers in many forms: fresh, dried, smoked, crushed, and powdered. Different varieties were valued for different flavors and levels of heat. Chili appeared in stews, tamales, sauces, and cacao drinks consumed by nobles and warriors. It was so ordinary that going without it was considered a form of fasting. But chili could also become a weapon. Some Mesoamerican communities burned peppers to produce choking smoke. The fumes irritated the eyes, throat, and lungs, making them useful in warfare and punishment. Accounts describe children being disciplined by forcing them to inhale smoke from burning chilies. Thousands of years before modern pepper spray, people had already discovered that capsaicin could control a room. Across the Inca world farther south, peppers known broadly as ají were equally important. They were traded, preserved, offered in ritual contexts, and used to create flavors that had no direct equivalent elsewhere. By the late 1400s, chili peppers had already conquered the Americas. Then, in 1492, a group of exhausted Europeans arrived looking for something else entirely. Christopher Columbus did not sail west in search of chili peppers. He was searching for a route to Asia and access to the spice trade, especially black pepper. Black pepper was extraordinarily valuable in Europe. It came from South and Southeast Asia through long commercial networks controlled by merchants, ports, and political powers that European kingdoms desperately wanted to bypass. When Columbus encountered pungent fruits in the Caribbean, he decided they were a kind of pepper. They were not. Black pepper comes from the plant Piper nigrum. Chili peppers belong to the genus Capsicum. Botanically, they are not close relatives. But Columbus needed his voyage to look successful, so the name survived. This completely unrelated American fruit became a pepper, because Europeans were looking for Asian pepper and refused to admit they had reached the wrong continent. It was one of the most consequential naming mistakes in food history. Spanish ships carried capsicum seeds back to Europe by the early 1490s. At first, the plants were treated as exotic botanical curiosities. Monasteries and wealthy collectors grew them in gardens alongside other strange specimens brought from across the Atlantic. Europe already had expensive spices. Wealthy households used black pepper, cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, and saffron as signs of status. Chili was new, suspicious, and painfully aggressive. But it possessed two advantages that would eventually make it unstoppable. It was easy to grow. And it was cheap. Black pepper required a tropical environment and arrived through distant commercial networks. Nutmeg and cloves grew in highly restricted island ecosystems controlled by violent monopolies. Saffron required enormous amounts of human labor. Chili peppers could grow in a garden. A person did not need a trading company, a royal license, or a fortune to obtain heat. They needed a handful of seeds, warm weather, and soil. The spice of kings could now be reproduced by farmers. This threatened an entire economic order. But Spain was not the main force behind Chile's global conquest. The true acceleration came through Portugal. During the 1500s, Portuguese merchants and sailors established a chain of ports stretching down the coast of Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, across the Indian Ocean, and into India, Southeast Asia, China, and Japan. Their ships carried silver, weapons, textiles, enslaved people, religious missionaries, diseases, and plants. Among those plants were chili peppers. Seeds were almost perfect cargo. They were small, lightweight, easy to store, and capable of producing thousands more seeds after a successful harvest. Within roughly half a century of their arrival in Europe, chili peppers were spreading through coastal Africa and large parts of Asia. This was not a slow agricultural migration. It was a botanical explosion. The Portuguese reached Goa on India's western coast in the early 1500s. India already possessed one of the most sophisticated spice cultures on earth. Indian cooks had black pepper, long pepper, ginger, mustard, turmeric, cardamom, and countless regional aromatics. Food could be sharp, pungent, and intensely seasoned long before American chilies arrived. But chili offered something different. It created powerful heat. It grew quickly. It could be dried without losing its intensity. And unlike black pepper, it could be cultivated locally by ordinary farmers. The economics were irresistible. A family that could not afford imported peppercorns could grow chilies beside the house. Farmers could plant them between other crops. Merchants could transport dried pods across enormous distances without rapid spoilage. Chili did not replace India's older spices completely. It joined them, blended with them, and eventually transformed them. Regional cuisines adopted it at different speeds and in different ways. Fresh green chilies provided a sharp, immediate heat. Dried red chilies contributed color and depth. Ground chili became part of spice mixtures and sauces. Over time, dishes that had once relied more heavily on black pepper, long pepper, or ginger were reformulated around capsicum. Today, it is almost impossible to imagine many Indian cuisines without chili. That should feel strange. The ingredient now associated with some of India's most famous foods had arrived from the Americas after medieval India was already over. The same transformation occurred across Southeast Asia. Portuguese merchants operated through ports that connected India with Malacca, the Indonesian archipelago, and trading centers farther east. Spanish ships also carried American plants across the Pacific through routes linking Mexico and the Philippines. Chili entered one of the busiest commercial environments on the planet. And it flourished. In Thailand, cooks combined it with lime, fish sauce, herbs, garlic, and fermented ingredients. The result was not simply hotter food. Chili became part of a carefully balanced system involving heat, sourness, sweetness, salt, and bitterness. In Vietnam, fresh and dried chilies entered sauces, soups, marinades, and condiments. In the Indonesian archipelago, they became the foundation of sambal, a vast family of chili preparations that varies from island to island and household to household. There is no single sambal. It can contain fresh peppers, dried peppers, shrimp paste, garlic, shallots, tomatoes, citrus, sugar, or fermented ingredients. It may be raw, cooked, smooth, coarse, sweet, smoky, or brutally hot. The American fruit had not simply been added to Indonesian cuisine. It had been absorbed so completely that communities reinvented it hundreds of times. China presents an equally remarkable case. Before chili peppers, Chinese cooks created pungency with ingredients such as ginger, mustard, garlic, black pepper, and Sichuan peppercorn. Sichuan pepper is particularly important because it does not produce the same sensation as chili. Its compounds create a tingling, numbing feeling on the lips and tongue. When chili entered China during the late 1500s or 1600s, possibly through several maritime and overland routes, it encountered an existing culture of complex sensory heat. The combination was extraordinary. In Sichuan cuisine, chili's burning sensation joined the numbing effect of Sichuan peppercorn to create mala, numbing and hot. The two ingredients trigger different physical responses. Together, they create a sensation that can feel like electricity moving across the mouth. But chili did not become equally dominant everywhere in China. It gained its strongest foothold in inland provinces such as Sichuan, Hunan, Guizhou, and Yunnan. These regions had climates suitable for cultivation and, in many areas, populations that benefited from an inexpensive way to make plain staple foods more exciting. Salt was taxed or difficult to obtain in some places. Meat could be scarce. Chili could transform a bowl of grain or vegetables at very little cost. A luxury flavor had become a survival flavor. The poor adopted it first. Eventually, entire regions built culinary identities around it. By the time later generations inherited these cuisines, the foreign origin of chili had almost disappeared from cultural memory. Korea's transformation may be the most visually dramatic of all. Modern Korean food is famous for its red color. Gochugaru colors kimchi, soups, stews, marinades, and side dishes. Gochujang gives fermented heat and sweetness to some of the country's best-known meals. But Korean food before the late 1500s could not have looked the same. Chili peppers reached the Korean peninsula during a turbulent era, with historical references appearing around the early 17th century. The precise path is still debated, but the plant arrived through the new networks connecting East Asia to maritime trade. At first, chili was foreign. Then Korean cooks discovered that it worked exceptionally well with fermentation. Chili did more than add pain. It added color, aroma, and compounds that interacted with preservation practices. It entered kimchi gradually. Not every form of earlier kimchi was red or hot. Over generations, the new ingredient merged with cabbage, radish, garlic, ginger, salted seafood, and fermentation. The result became so culturally powerful that red chili is now almost impossible to separate from the global image of Korean cuisine. A plant from the Americas arrived after 1492 and became part of how Korea presents itself to the world. Think about that for a second. An ingredient can be foreign in one century, common in the next, and ancient in the imagination of the century after that. Japan encountered chili through Portuguese contact as well, but incorporated it differently. Japanese cuisine used chili in condiments and certain preparations without making extreme heat its dominant identity. Japanese traders and military movements may also have helped the plant move through the region. But the same seed that became central to Korean fermentation remained a supporting ingredient in much of Japan. Availability alone does not explain culinary adoption. Culture chooses what survives. Meanwhile, chili peppers were spreading across Africa. West Africa already possessed sources of pungency, including grains of paradise and other local spices. But American capsicum adapted extremely well to African environments. Portuguese trade introduced peppers along coastal routes. From there, farmers, merchants, migrants, and inland trade networks carried them farther. Once again, chili's agricultural advantages mattered as much as its flavor. The plants produced abundantly. The fruits could be sold fresh or dried. Their heat made simple foods more satisfying, while different communities selected varieties suited to local climates and preferences. Across West Africa, chilies became essential to stews, soups, sauces, and spice pastes. In Ethiopia and surrounding regions, capsicum peppers entered complex seasoning traditions and became central to mixtures such as berbere. In southern Africa, small hot varieties became associated with peri-peri preparations. Portuguese colonial networks later connected these African chili traditions to Mozambique, Angola, Portugal, and eventually restaurant menus around the world. The path was not simple. Chili had traveled from the Americas to Europe, from Europe into Africa and Asia, and then back through colonial cultures in completely new forms. Every stop transformed it. Europe, strangely, showed less enthusiasm for extreme heat than many regions that received chili later. But one European region embraced the fruit in a different way. Hungary. Peppers reached Central Europe through trade and Ottoman influence. Over time, Hungarian growers selected varieties for color, flavor, and reduced heat. The dried pods were ground into paprika. Paprika could be mild and sweet or sharp and hot. It colored soups, stews, sausages, and dishes such as goulash. By the 19th century, it had become a symbol of Hungarian cooking and national culture. But the familiar mildness of much modern paprika resulted partly from plant breeding and processing. Farmers selected peppers with less capsaicin, while producers learned to control heat by removing the internal tissues where capsaicinoids are concentrated. The chili had been domesticated twice in a sense. First, indigenous American farmers transformed the wild plant. Then global cultures transformed its meaning. In India it became heat. In Korea it became fermentation and color. In Hungary it became paprika. In West Africa it became the heart of sauces and stews. In Thailand it became one element in a balance of competing sensations. The plant conquered the world by allowing the world to reinvent it. But one question remains. Why would humans enjoy a chemical designed to cause pain? For most animals, pain is a warning. It means stop what you are doing. Humans sometimes interpret it as a challenge. When capsaicin activates heat-sensitive nerves, the brain responds to the perceived threat. The body may release endorphins and other chemicals associated with relief and reward. The burning sensation rises, peaks, and then fades. For some people, that cycle becomes pleasurable. You survive the bite. The pain retreats. The next bite feels possible. Repeated exposure can also increase tolerance. A meal that seems unbearable to a new eater may feel ordinary to someone raised with it. This helps explain why standards of normal heat vary so widely. A child learns not only a cuisine but a sensory expectation. The burn becomes connected to family, comfort, celebration, masculinity, bravery, or home. Pain becomes memory. And eventually, people begin competing over it. For centuries, growers selected increasingly hot peppers. But during the modern era, that process became an international arms race. The Scoville scale, developed by American pharmacist Wilbur Scoville in 1912, attempted to measure a pepper's heat. Early testing relied on diluted pepper extracts and human tasters. The more dilution required before the heat became undetectable, the higher the score. Modern laboratories can measure capsaicinoid concentration more precisely, but Scoville heat units remain the language most consumers recognize. A bell pepper sits near 0. A jalapeno may reach several thousand units. Cayenne peppers can reach tens of thousands. Habaneros climb into the hundreds of thousands. Then come the superhots. But Jolokia, the ghost pepper, became internationally famous after tests placed it above 1 million Scoville units. Later varieties pushed even higher as breeders deliberately crossed plants in search of new records. Carolina Reaper. Trinidad Moruga Scorpion. Pepper X. Their names sound less like vegetables and more like medieval weapons. At that level, eating a pepper stops being an ordinary culinary experience. It becomes a physical event. People cough, vomit, shake, panic, or temporarily lose the ability to speak. In unusual cases, extreme consumption has been associated with medical emergencies. And still, people line up to try them. Restaurants sell spicy challenges. Internet creators film themselves eating peppers for millions of viewers. Hot sauce companies package pain in bottles decorated with skulls, flames, coffins, and warning signs. The chili's original message was, "Do not eat me." Human beings turned that warning into marketing. The modern hot sauce industry is now worth billions of dollars. Supermarket shelves carry sauces inspired by Mexico, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, Africa, and the American South. Some products emphasize flavor. Others sell danger. But behind every bottle is a history far larger than branding suggests. Colonial expansion helped carry chilies around the globe. Imperial ports determined their early routes. Enslaved and exploited people cultivated, cooked, and transformed crops while colonial powers took the profits. Yet chili also escaped the control of empires. Unlike sugar, coffee, or tea, it did not always require enormous plantations, expensive machinery, or centralized processing. A farmer could save seeds from one harvest and plant them again. A family could grow its own supply. That made chili difficult to monopolize. European powers transported it, but they could not completely own what happened next. Local cooks took control. They selected new varieties, combined them with existing traditions, and created foods the original merchants could never have imagined. The Portuguese moved the seeds. India, Thailand, China, Korea, Indonesia, and Africa decided what those seeds would become. Today, chili peppers are grown across the world in an astonishing range of forms. China and India are among the largest producers. Mexico preserves enormous capsicum diversity. Peru remains home to countless ají varieties. Peppers appear fresh, dried, smoked, pickled, powdered, fermented, frozen, canned, and blended into sauces. They are also used far beyond food. Capsaicin appears in topical creams intended to help manage certain kinds of pain. The same compound that activates pain receptors can, under controlled conditions, reduce their responsiveness after repeated exposure. Capsaicin is used in pepper sprays carried by police forces and civilians. Some farmers use chili-based deterrents to protect crops from mammals. In parts of Africa and Asia, chili mixtures have even been used in attempts to discourage elephants from entering farmland. The fruit that evolved to manipulate animals is still doing exactly that. But its greatest achievement remains cultural. Ask someone to picture Indian food and they may imagine red curry. Ask about Korean food and they may see kimchi. Mention Sichuan and they may think of chili oil. Mention Thailand and they may anticipate the heat before the meal even arrives. These associations feel permanent. They are not. Before the Columbian Exchange, Italy had no tomatoes. Ireland had no potatoes. Switzerland had no chocolate. India had no chili peppers. The cuisines people defend as ancient and pure are often records of migration, trade, conquest, adaptation, and accident. Chili exposes that truth more clearly than almost any other ingredient. It began as a wild American fruit trying to persuade mammals to leave it alone. Indigenous farmers ignored the warning and transformed it through thousands of years of patient selection. Civilizations used it as food, medicine, ritual material, and weapon. Columbus mislabeled it while searching for Asia. Portuguese sailors carried it through ports spanning half the planet. Farmers adopted it because it was cheap, productive, and easy to grow. Cooks folded it into traditions far older than the plant's presence in their countries. Within a few centuries, the outsider became essential. The foreign fruit became a national symbol. And a chemical defense became one of humanity's favorite sensations. Tonight, somewhere in Mexico, a family will toast dried chilies for a sauce. In India, someone will drop green chilies into hot oil. In Korea, gochugaru will stain a batch of kimchi red. In Thailand, a cook will crush bird's eye chilies with garlic. In Hungary, paprika will dissolve into a pot of stew. In West Africa, peppers will disappear into a sauce whose recipe has passed through generations. All of them are participating in the same global story. A story of birds, pain, indigenous agriculture, mistaken geography, oceanic trade, colonial power, and human appetite. 500 years ago, most of the world had never seen a chili pepper. Today, billions of people cannot imagine food without one. Not bad for a fruit that spent millions of years trying not to be eaten. If this story changed the way you think about spicy food, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments which chili-based cuisine you could never give up. And make sure to like the video so more people can discover the hidden history inside their next meal.